Thank you all for coming this evening. Tonight's guest is Gisele Feldman. When Gisele was 9 years old, she was separated from her parents and eventually sent to live as a hidden child at a castle owned by General Lafayette in France, which was a hospital clinic for children to be protected from the Nazis. She's here to talk to us this evening about her life, and she's written about her life in her book, Saved by the Spirit of Lafayette, The French Righteous and the Hidden Children. I'd like to welcome you. Thank you very much for coming to the library this evening.
Thank you. My pleasure. Okay. I went to two places before I went to the castle. I hid in different places. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to say about the book, besides my story, my story would have been very small, and all of us survivors are getting older, and pretty soon there won't be any witnesses. So I knew that I had to write this, and I wanted my friends, neighbors, anybody who didn't want to write their stories, I wanted their stories to leave it for history. So I have more than my story. And then I have my thoughts. And then I especially stress the righteous. Do you all know what the righteous is? Do you want me to explain it, or do you all know? And then I have a very strong French accent. I taught French in the public schools in Livonia, Michigan, and I spoke French, and my accent is going to be with me forever. So whenever I say a sentence with an R in it, especially the word righteous, I'll try to change it to, what did we say? A Savior sounds like the Christ, so I better use people who save. Do you all understand righteous? I guess not. Okay. So I'll use the Savior sounds okay? Yeah, it's actually. Yeah, okay. All right. At the end of my story, I would like to ask me questions, but I'll ask the first question. Who do you think is the most lucky person in this room today? Me. All right. I was born in Paris, France. Okay. My father was a Russian immigrant. My mother was born in France but moved back to Russia and came back later, and they both married. And we lived in a working class neighborhood, not in a Jewish neighborhood, mixed neighborhoods. And most of my friends were non-Jewish. My parents were not religious at all. Can you hear me? And I didn't even know what it was to be Jewish. I didn't know. Once, when I told my mother or one member of the family or some visitors, that I was going to marry the blonde boy with the blue eyes that I played with, and they did tell me that, no, you could not marry him because he was not Jewish, but I didn't understand it at the time at all. So that was my extent of racism, someone telling me I could not marry this boy with the blue eyes, blonde hair. Anyway, by 1939, my mother was a dressmaker, excellent dressmaker, who worked for an excellent company. She was a dressmaker tailor, and her talent, gifted fingers, saved us during the war. Okay, I'll give you examples. In 1939, I think, in the summer, before I was evacuated, the people already started hearing stories about they didn't hear about death camp, really, but they heard about work camps. But then eventually it changed to death camp because some people had escaped the camps, and they were telling the truth. But then there were also rumors of a war, impending war between France and Germany. So the people of Paris, where we lived, started putting sandbags in the in the stairs, under the windows, and of course, we all became nervous. I became nervous because my parents were nervous. And one day, we all had to go to the, what do you call the place where the fire station. I'm having a problem because of the medicine I'm taking. Okay, it affects my memory. And there they fitted us for gas masks. And I remember screaming my head off. And besides, as I'm going to explain to you later, I have a deformity here. I had rickets before the war because we didn't have enough food. My parents were too poor. I wasn't eating properly. And before the war, I was going to a clinic to lose this called the Rockefeller Clinic. Rockefeller was helping us in France. But then the treatment stopped because of the war. But then, as I told Marianne, my publisher, during the war, when I had to hide and be admitted into this castle clinic, this probably helped the doctor take a chance. He could have lost his life taking me in. And this probably helped him, the fact that I was not formed like the others, and I had a little less oxygen than others. Anyway, back to the story. Pretty soon there were no TV, so on the radio, people were told that the children of Paris, because of course the government was planning to start the war against Germany, that the children could be evacuated to summer camps to save the children from the bombs that were going to fall. And then it was up to the parents to say yes or no. And my mother had been in Russia during the revolution, and she had seen what happens during wars and revolution and how ugly people can get. My father had been sent by the social services. France has always had, as far as I can remember, socialized medicine. I'm waiting for us to get it here. Not for me, but for the young people and for all of you. Okay, it's fantastic. The French system is tremendous. I like America better. I wouldn't go back. But that's better than what we have. Okay, now, my father was in a little village, and my mother decided to not even ask him, not to bother him, that she decided on her own that we were going to be evacuated. And that was the most fearful, horrible experience. I couldn't talk about it for years. And then now I speak so much that now it's as if I'm telling someone else's story. And until we get to certain points, then it becomes more personal. Anyway, we had to go. Here is France and Paris. Paris is right here. In the city of Paris, there are 4 or 5 or 6 train stations with I'm exaggerating, dozens and dozens of trains going in all directions, night and day. So you don't need a car, actually. You can go anywhere. So I was going to be evacuated close to Switzerland. And so my brother didn't go with me. He was evacuated to Normandy. Okay? I was safe. After a while, he wasn't safe because 2 years later, he would have been caught in the occupied France. I was in free France. And the scene at the train station was horrible. I'd never seen anything like it. Almost no adults the adults were mostly not allowed to come, and all the children were screaming and crying. It was horrible. And until we got on the train, and I loved the sound of the wheels on the train, and it calmed us down. And then we went to a beautiful villa where I think we were maybe 40 or 50 girls, and we were close to Switzerland, and strangely enough, we were close to a plane factory, so when the war started, we could hear bombing far away. Most of the ladies were very nice, but you grew up in a different system than I did. I grew up in a very authoritarian system where you were always put down, humiliated, punished, criticized, I was so jealous when I came here. And I saw the school system. I envied all the students for what they had had and what I had not had. It took me a lifetime to recover. Thank God I came here. Well, anyway, things were okay, but not okay. We were afraid. There was a war starting, and we didn't know when we would get up to see our parents again. And then the punishments were so strange. I had never seen such sadism. We didn't have enough toilet paper we had a few bathrooms in the courtyard and in the building, and they had no toilet paper. They would put pieces of newspapers, and sometimes we ran out of them. And so we sold our panties. You won't believe what I'm going to tell you. I only heard it one more time on 60 Minutes. Some nuns in Ireland, I think, were doing the same thing. We had to show our panty to an older girl, and if a panty was soiled, we were shamed. I never had shaming before. So that's the past of Europe. We have to clean that up. It was so sick. And that also I did not mention for years and years and years. But I was safe from the bombing. And then the war started. France was divided in half. But before that, my mother at time, she decided to go to this part of France where my father was, in a little village nearby called Pont-Laguet. I think I have the pictures somewhere. And she took lodging there. And someone in the monastery, and we all think it was the people from the French government who were hiding there as monks, told the doctor and the police in the village to tell my mother to go get my brother in Normandy. And they either did not believe or didn't want to leave their good apartments with all modern comforts, and they didn't know, of course, what was going to be later. Auschwitz was not a modern apartment. And they didn't want to come to the village because there was no running water in the village. My mother had to go to the fountain, and she had a chamber pot. I would do it again just to survive. But anyway, they did not listen to my mother. My grandmother is the only one who got out with my mother, and then my mother went to get my brother and then back to the village. And then a few months later, she came to get me. So for 2 years, we were right there. Oh, I lost the 2 pictures. No, here they are. Thank God. I think they're here. Yeah. I have to show you those pictures. We've been at peace, safe. We felt we are far away from the Germans. We keep hearing about our relatives being caught, but we feel safe and protected. We're in free France, but it only lasted 2 years. And then one day, the police, I think it was the chief of police, and our loving doctor, my righteous, the man who saved us, my brother and I, and my parents, came to us and said, it's very bad. The chief of police had received papers saying that the Jews were going to be caught, put together and sent to the French camps and then to Auschwitz. And even if the mother was French, my mother was French, even if the children were French, we were French. But as long as my father was not French and he was a Jew, he was a foreigner, we all had to go with him. Before I forget, I want to show you, before you leave, these are my relatives who did not listen to my parents, to my mother. And they all died in Auschwitz. And this little girl, was in a French camp. She was separated.
You should let me just hold it up so you can talk.
Okay. Thank you. She was put in a train, in a cattle car. The whole train consisted of 4,000 children. And I saw the film. A girlfriend called me, I think it was 2 years ago. She said, watch the film on TV. It's on the Holocaust. I never watch films on the Holocaust. It's depressing. It brings back everything that I never think of, except when I speak. But even when I speak, I do something. I feel as if I'm telling someone else's story, and I don't get involved unless you ask a special question. But anyway, they showed on the film the train, because I have the numbers of the convoys. I have the day they were sent. The French people were just like Eichmann. They have a complete list of all the French Jews that were sent to Germany and Poland. And at the Holocaust Center, there is a book in French with all my relatives. Yeah.
Extensive lists of you know, the Germans were brilliant people, but the biggest mistake they made was to have extensive lists of all these people and where they went. So it's total proof that.
Yes, and then the French did the same thing, because we had to be perfect. Everything you did had to be perfect. So my little cousin, and the next morning, by the time they came, if they were still alive, by the time they came out of this train, I hate to tell you how it was in the train. I hope you all have a good stomach. Here is the cattle train. There was one bucket there for the water, and one bucket there for the bathroom. And then they had to go from France to Poland in that little thing. So those people were really not evolved, I would say. And before I forgot at the beginning, two of my most disliked names in France. I'm talking about the bad French, but there were so many good ones. That comes next. Okay? So many people were hurt because of two names. Pétain, which replaced the French government in Vichy, and then Laval. The Laval, I think they shot him after the war, is the man who, when the Nazis at first wanted only the adults Jews, he said, no, if you want the adults, he said, les enfants aussi, the children also. Now I need to drink.
When the Hidden Children had a group, you know, they all met, and they brought in psychiatrists and doctors and counselors to work with them, saying, you know, as children, we have no way of being able to work out these issues when you're 7, 8, 9 years old and these horrible things happen to you. And these counselors and psychiatrists and doctors were saying, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it.
And they allowed us, they gave us permission to cry and to talk about it, because many people, when we first came here, would not let us talk about it. They felt that they were mistakenly thinking that we should forget it, bury it, but it's not. The more I speak, the more I read stories of people who are saved, the better I feel, and I've never been happier than I am now, except I'm under the weather now. But
but it's healing. It's healing, and I think that's. But it's still, as I've said, you know, in talking with Gisele so many times, she will just start crying, and it's because you're overwrought with emotion. You just can't make it go away.
It's there.
It's still inside of you.
And I would like you to see later those two pictures. This is 1940, when we are together, and my brother must be taking the picture. And this is 2 years later, when we have to separate, because we know. You look at all the people in this picture, they don't look very happy. You see, I'm the only one who smiles. I'm nervous. I don't know what's going on. They won't tell me a thing. I don't know that we're threatened with death. I don't know. I was never told that there were hunters hunting for me already. So maybe I'll just pass them like I do with the students. Okay. 1940, 1942. Look at the picture of my family and another Jewish man who lived in the village. I guess they're scared to death. Okay. We all had to separate. It was the best way to survive, they told us. And I want to make sure you see me. There you go. And the doctor, Dr. Bolagnon, my biggest righteous, always came to the house and always tried to help us. And he came to see my mother and he said, well, first we should try, you probably want to keep her close, so why don't we place her in a farm at the end of the village? The problem was with the farm that first day, I have to make sure everybody sees me. In the farm, the farmer didn't know what to do with me, so he made me watch cows. Well, I was straight from Paris. I didn't do very well with cows. I was petrified. Anyway, that didn't work. And then he didn't know what to do. He was besides himself. He took me hunting, and he started killing birds. And that was the end of it. My mother, I love birds, and my Jewish name is Dove. And then he was killing everything and the doves, and it was horrible. Anyway, from there, my father was hiding way on top of a big mount, in a little hamlet, and he was sent there because there were no girls, no bars, no cafe, no restaurant, nothing, just little farms. And they felt that no Germans would go up there because there was nothing to do. And he was saved that way. But my second hiding place was not far from him, also on a plateau high, way up. It was magnificent. Oh, I forgot the other pictures of the beautiful place. I was hiding in heaven. The countryside was magnificent. And of course, the third, even the little hamlet where I ended up in, the wife of a friend of my father took me in, and she was an excellent cook, and she would cook for the passerby. And you're right, all this is not in my book. See? Yeah. You did well to come. Yeah. So here I am. I'm the one who serves the food. And guess who was stopping at the restaurant? Too many tall men, leather coats, leather boots, leather jacket, leather hat, swastika. And they would keep hitting my little head and say, oh, what a nice little French girl. And I became a nervous wreck, and I got a nervous stomach, and my mother had to come and get me. So that was my second, didn't do well. And then when I got home, Dr. Bolagnon, the village doctor, came to my mother and he said, listen, for your safety, it's getting worse. For your safety, you have to go somewhere else, and I have an idea. And he went to the castle, which is the castle clinic. Okay, now I have to review your history. See what you know, you don't know. Okay. Two men on the horse. One is an American and one is a French one. And they're famous. One as famous as the other. No, Rochambeau I have in another picture. You're too fast. It's about the American Revolution. Here is Lafayette, and here is General Washington on his horse. General Washington was so proud of Lafayette, one of the richest men, young man, I think he was 17, who disobeyed all the laws of the king, went to Spain, hired boats, ships, brought arms and soldiers to come and help General Washington fight for the freedom. He had studied philosophy and and he wanted to help. He believed in freedom of religion. And there he was. He became like a son to Lafayette. But I know the rest of you know, did you all study Lafayette when you were in school? In my school, when I was teaching, I don't remember anybody teaching about Lafayette. So I made sure I showed my students that. Okay, and that's a castle. Well, where's my map? The doctor had gone to the castle. By the way, when I was there, I was on American soil, believe it or not. The castle belonged to an American foundation who were keeping the castle in good order. It must have been 42. Yeah, I think I think the end of the winter 42. That's when it became very dangerous. That's when the doctor and the police came to tell us to separate. Thank you for making that point. There's so much to tell, so either I talk too much or I don't say enough or I forget something. I'm getting old. But I have an excuse. I have white hair. Anyway, one day the good doctor came and told us, oh, by the way, during the First World War, with the help of the Americans, and even during the Second World War with the help of the Americans, money was sent and we had clothing, and I don't think they could send food. It wouldn't have gone through. The Germans would have stolen it. But I don't know. I think they sent funds. Let's see. I don't think I bought my pictures. Oh, they're in the book. Okay. This is the front of the castle. Okay. And this is the rose garden. And if you look closely when you come and walk, there's the French flag and the American one. It's always there. And I'll tell you about this in a few minutes. I have a picture in here. I had some French people take it of my dorm. Here it is. You'll see it later. The dorm is in a wing right here. Okay? And the dorms were for the clinic. Okay? That's where the girls were. So let me tell you about life in the castle. There is a speaker at the Holocaust Center who I'm showing you the difference between what I had, what she had. They had gone to a wedding from France to the Ukraine, and they were caught there. And in order to survive, an Ukrainian farmer took them in, and they, in order for him not to get shot, they there were two sisters and father and mother. They put them in a barn, and they were not allowed to walk in the daytime because they had children, and the children would have found out. So at the end of the war, this young woman, well, she was a teenager, she had to really learn how to walk. So in my case, my dorm was in a castle in a beautiful, magnificent room, but we had to protect the beautiful parquet floor, so we had to, under our shoes, we had to wear a little, what do you call this kind of material that you put under your lamps and things, not so that you don't mark the felt? Thank you. We walked on felt, on pieces of felt, so that we wouldn't. It was a beautiful experience. Everything was wonderful except I starved. I was more hungry than everyone because of my problem here. Because when I walk, when I exercise, when I do anything, I burn more energy than anybody else. I eat more than a man. I eat every 2-3 hours. I eat like almost sometimes half a pound of almonds a day, and I weigh 89 pounds. But I'm doing very well. American doctors discovered vitamins, and I'm doing splendidly, except when I get poisoned by bad medicine. Anyway, we didn't have enough food. I was starving, but so did the other children, but I was starving more. And then I discovered one thing. I don't know where I got it. I started eating grass. I did. I ate grass, but not the grass on your lawn. You would give me $1,000 and I wouldn't touch it. Why? It's full of chemicals. Well, I would only go to, when we were hiking all the time, whenever I would find a patch of absolutely green, clean grass, I would bend down, open the shoots and eat inside the yellow one. And actually, I was eating a salad, getting vitamins. So I became a vegetarian early. We all became Girl Scouts, Catholic Girl Scouts. I went to church every Sunday, sang in the choir, and I didn't know the priest knew I was Jewish. And he would often, with my little girlfriends, he would want to walk me to the church, from the church to the castle, and he made me nervous because I had been told that I couldn't tell anyone I was Jewish because they would get hurt. In his case, my brother would, instead of getting, what's the thing that you do in confession, this lovely priest would let him come to confession, and he would talk about the weather, about him, how he was doing, and about the progress of the Allies when they started coming in. So nobody turned us in. But after the war, my mother didn't dare tell us during the war. After the war, I found out that 15 children, Jewish children, from a Jewish group called Hayas, had sent 15 children to be hidden in the castle, I think in our section. And one of the, it's not matron, what's another word for people who take care of children, or I can't think of the word. The caregiver had called the Nazis, but someone heard her. So we went on the, my mother told me afterwards that we probably went on a long walk, and I remembered one day, the only time, we took a long hike all the way to the mountains, and there we passed the 15 children to the underground fighters, and they were saved. And then, as I told you, Marianne, at one point, and I forgot one more incident, we were hunted, really well hunted. At one point, I was lost with a caregiver, in the woods. I don't get lost, I have good, and I knew where the castle was. And it was nighttime, there were two little girls and a boy. We don't go for walks with the boys, especially at night. He was smaller than us. I didn't know why we were lost. And then when I was writing the book, I thought, of course, because someone was looking for us. Someone was looking for children, Jewish children, in the castle and probably in the boys' section in the woods. And then one day in the dorm, we had to take naps every afternoon. And since I had become the sweetest, most polite, most sweet child, because I was afraid to be punished, and I was afraid to be disliked, and I was afraid to die. So I was always the matrons. I keep going back to the word matrons. Let's say my bed was always next to the matron while who was supervising us. And then one day, men never came in our dorm, and a man bent down and asked the matron a question, and she said no. And I knew immediately what he had asked. So I came close. That's why I told you at the beginning, I'm the luckiest person you will see today. And of course, the doctor would have been killed if he had been caught, and his wife and children, and so would the doctor from that clinic. So I never told a soul, and I had many little friends there. Okay. Let's see if I forgot anything.
What happened was they did have the people come in and investigate the castle, and to see who
Oh,
was there.
every place where there were children. I have a book which is a true story, but they made it into a novel of in one section of France where they were really, really hunting the Jewish children, and one teacher and a few other people even built what do you call those tree houses? They were gigantic trees. It must have been in the south of France, near Spain, if I remember well. And they had little houses in the tree houses to hide the children if the hunters were coming. And at one point, the people in charge of the children who were Jewish had to kill one of the hunters. It was getting too close. So that's why my book is to say thank you to the righteous. They took so many chances. And also, as a Jew, many Jews who have always been put down did not feel that we should thank and honor the Jewish righteous. Okay, so I took care of that. They also had plenty to lose. More, if they had been caught by the Nazis, they would have suffered more and they would have been tortured more. So I give honor and thanks to everyone and to the underground fighters.
Why don't you?
Can I just ask Marion if you would introduce yourself to the audience?
I'm Gisele's publisher. I published her book,
And she gave me the first sentence after she read my book. You're saying thank you to everyone.
and
Your book is a big thank you, and that's what it is.
Now, can you go from after the war and how you got to the United States?
Of course. It was very, very lucky. For this time, it was lucky that my father was Russian, because we tried to come on the French quota. My uncle here sent us the papers, wanted to send us the papers, but we couldn't get on the French quota. And then my father, or someone who helped him, I don't remember, told him to apply under the Russian quota. Well, nobody was allowed to leave Russia. There was nobody in the Russian quota, on the Russian quota. So we got in, and then in 1948, we came to the USA. It was very hard at the beginning, very hard. And then we had an uncle who was in the army in France, and we didn't know he was a gambler, and we gave him all our savings. So that's why it was so hard, but it was all worthwhile. The uncle lived here. We couldn't go to New York. We would have gone to New York because we'd heard about New York, but I like living in Michigan better than living in New York. I like to go there to visit. And my brother lives in North Carolina. My brother cannot be Jewish, and he cannot talk about it, about the. And I have two cousins in France who escaped the roundup of all the Jews in Paris. And that's a star. I'm glad you asked that question. That's a star he had to wear during the war. That's a copy. The star is in, I think, my bank vault. Okay? And then he went through hell. He was caught in the roundup, and it was gross. That's where all my relatives, most of them here, got caught. And you imagine an old stadium with a few bathrooms, a little water, I don't know if there was water, and thousands and thousands of Jews. 20, where is my note? I have to work on fixing those notes. But anyway, I think there were 28,000 Jews who were supposed to be arrested. And guess that's where the righteous come in Paris, with the French and German police. They only caught 19,000. All the others were saved by the police or the secretaries. Everybody started phoning all the Jews they knew to run away. But some of the mothers with children could not flee because the husband had been caught. And they didn't know where to go. And many of the policemen who came to the door would tell the mother, take the children, take a few bags, and go shopping, come back in a few hours. What were they saying? Go away, run. But my aunt wouldn't do it. This is my aunt, Sonia. She would not let her husband behind. So she went back, and she ended up in this horrible place. And when my aunt saw what was going on there, she understood what was happening. It was going to be death at the end. So there were a few doctors in the center. And by the way, they even went to the Rothschild. I'm telling you horrible things. I don't know if I should have. Well, you're all adults, actually. They even had to pick up the people on the operating table. So there were naked old men or different people on tables with nothing on, with a wound open, all kinds of gross stuff that you can't even believe in. My aunt, there were two doctors in the center. My aunt went up to one. My cousin, he's now more Catholic than the Pope. He cannot be Jewish. He's so afraid to be Jewish. He's one of the 4 children who were allowed out of this hellhole. And his sister too. They cannot be Jewish. Some people say, aren't you ashamed? Ashamed of what? They're alive. I don't care what they are, as long as they're alive. And the doctor, my aunt told the doctor that he had chicken pox. Is that the one with the red flags? Well, my cousin gets that when he gets nervous. So the doctor didn't want all the children to get that and give them all kinds of problems until they got to the camps, the real German camps. So they were sent to the Rothschild hospital, and there they were saved. Doctors, nurses did all kinds of things to save them, and they ended up in different homes, and they survived the war in horrible manners, but they survived. But they will never be Jewish. Okay?
Ready for questions? Does anyone have questions for Gisele?
I got a couple quick. This is a great story. How long were you in the castle? How long did you stay at the castle? And
I was in the castle till from the end of the winter, 42, till I would say the summer or fall of 44. What happened is that and thank God my brother was not in Normandy. The Allies came from Normandy, but there were soldiers who came from the south of France, and with the help of the underground fighters, they freed France. Where I was, France was freed before the northern part. So I was freed I think in the fall of 44.
I wonder if what you think of the center in Farmington. Is it too emotional, or is it like they tell it as it is, or?
What did you ask me?
Holocaust Center in Farmington. You've been there, I take it.
Oh, I speak there.
Oh.
No,
Just wondering if it was real emotional, or is it like it's very accurate? You think it's very accurate?
Absolutely accurate. Wait a minute. Wait, some of the horrors are not even said. I have a girlfriend in Florida and I'm not talking about Jews there. Did not only pick on the Jews, they picked on the people who tried to help, on the people who came by parachute and landed in France, and they were caught. They tortured them to find out more. This friend told me that she was Catholic, married a Jewish man, became Jewish, and then she told me that her father, this was near Switzerland, was a taxi driver for a German and French torture camp. And she told me what he saw. I can't tell anyone. I couldn't sleep for 2 days. It's so ugly. And I've heard so much. I've seen so much. It's so horrible that I get sick, really sick. It's like savages, more than savages. Those people were really sick.
It's right at 12 Mile in Orchard Lake, and if you ever get a chance to go there, it's really a wonderful place. They have their library is just filled with documents from people all over the world that have sent pictures and stories of what has happened to them or their parents or their family, whatever.
Like a man in France who married the daughter of a Nazi works everywhere and collects all this, and he wrote a book, the list of all the Jews that were caught, and my relatives, one by one, especially the children, everybody's in that book, and that's the way I found out which camp they went to, which train they were in, and when they left. I know every detail. When I first went to the Holocaust Center, I was like a mouse. I was afraid to look. And when I went to the one in Washington, I went straight to the library. I didn't want to look at I do my part. I write the books. I write the stories of people who cannot, and then I speak. But I don't like to look through a Holocaust Center. And I wish I had never heard of what happened in that torture camp.
Do you know the book 20 and 10 by William Penn Dubois? It's about the children hidden in France, and I think some of them might have been in that same castle, because I read it years ago, but it's about the hidden children in the countryside.
It sounds very familiar. I have to look at home and see if I have it. I
Yeah.
have so many. Yeah.
Maybe it's here in the library, but he's a well-known children's author and illustrator.
You know, reading all those stories is what made me heal. Besides my students in school, I watched my students grow up, and I watched the way that teachers and their parents treated them, and I felt that this was better. We had found a way to not have people who would be so enraged as to kill. A whole country who accepts killing because they don't like one race, including the children, like Laval said. So I don't know if I answered you. What was your question again?
Whether you knew this book 20 and 10 by
I might
William Penn
have,
Dubois.
but I might have it, but I've read so many, and I'm still reading some.
It might even have been at that same castle. Your story sounded very familiar with what I remember about this book. And the Nazis come looking for the children, and the children pretend to be Catholic. And,
No, it happened all over France, in many castles. The people who had castles lent their castles to save the children. That's why I wrote this book, one of the reasons, because I don't want, I don't want Jews to think, I don't know who told them that the French were all bad. It isn't true. So many priests and many nuns ended up in camps and died. Yeah, so I like the truth to be known, especially mine. Yeah. Someone else had a question.
My question is, did your mother and father survive, and your brothers?
Yes, that's why I'm so lucky. I was hiding in the most beautiful place. I didn't have the right shoes. I have problems with my feet. I have problems finding shoes. I have osteoporosis, but all this is minor. My parents survived.
And all your siblings?
My brother, yes. Also.
Brother. Wonderful.
Even as a non-Jew.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Let me just repeat that. What do you remember about the day the war ended for good?
Well, I'm going to need a... That's it. I'm crying ahead of time. One day, at the gate of the castle, it was not Sunday, and there was my mother. And she was smiling. She never smiled during the war. And I knew the war was over, and she was coming for it. The war was going to be over up north, and then by 1945, then we heard about the camps, and how everybody died. And then we were depressed for a few years until we came here. Then here we didn't have time. We had to work hard, and I had to go to school, then to college. So and then I over the years, I learned about all the righteous. Here I'm defending the French because I have to. They saved me, but I heard so many stories. I have so many books about what the righteous did all over Europe. Even, where is that country that I kept talking about? Bosnia. Even in Bosnia, the Muslims were hiding the Jews. So I resent what the Bosnians did to the Muslims. It's just what the Nazis did, sometimes bury them alive or shooting the husband and the boys and in big holes. The children of today have to stop this everywhere.
One quick last question. When you were in the castle, was your mother able to communicate with you? Did
yes,
you hear
she would come. She would come once a month. She would walk 4 kilometers with two packages. Sometimes she brought me a coat, and my brother a little jacket, and she would bring us food. And she didn't know much about sugar. She didn't know that we were almost all of us diabetic. And I had learned in the place where I'd been evacuated that some people get all kinds of packages, especially the rich children, and they don't share. And I was shocked because I was always taught to share. But in the castle, my mother, the other mothers who could come, non-Jewish, brought all kinds of things, and I tasted splendid food. I tasted quince jelly. That is absolutely fabulous. And we all shared, but I always got sick because I can't take sugar. But here I learned to cook with apples and different fruit. And there's a sugar from South America that I have to invest in. And it was a wonderful experience. And being a Girl Scout was great. And I learned about America, about Thomas Jefferson, about Benjamin Franklin. Our Girl Scout troop was called Eye of the Crow. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, C-R-O-W. Did you get it? So I learned to love the Indians, and when we went hiking, we had to play cowboy and Indians, and I didn't quite like that because we had to crawl like the Indians on the soil. But the problem was that the French countryside there had little what's the word? Snakes, tiny little snakes, and we were more afraid of the snakes than of the Indians.
Any other questions?
I I have a personal question for you. Do you consider yourself religious, or are you
Uh,
a religious person? Or
I am, but not not the way you would think. Uh, I went to church, and I loved it, and it loved me. And then I went to the synagogue here, and for some reason, I don't want the prayer books from either. I want to pray. I want to say my own prayers. I want to speak directly to God.
I just wondered if you received any news about how the war was going when the Germans had their big defeat at Stalingrad, or when Paris was liberated in August of '44. Did you hear about those things
Yeah,
at
my
all?
mother would tell me a few things, but I think she told more things to my brother. She was too careful with me, but she was too protective.
Gisele, I'd like to thank you very much for
My
coming
great
to the
pleasure.
library this evening and talking to us. And is it okay if people come up and look at your
Absolutely.
maps and pictures? Okay, thank you. And this concludes our broadcast. For a complete listing of upcoming events at the Ann Arbor District Library, visit our website at www.aadl.org or call the library at 734-327-4200, press option 3 for events listings.